Buck Buchanan actually was my role model, unbeknown to him, because one of my teachers whose name was Buchanan lied to me and told me his name was Buck and that he was the professional guy. And I looked at him and said, well, if he could do it, I know I could do it, because he was half my size.
Leonard Griffin knew in 4th grade that Buck Buchanan was someone he wanted to model his football career after. Little did the young Leonard know that he would play for the same team Buchanan played for.
It was very enlightening. He would share information with me, little details of what to do, what not to do. He took on that big brother role.
Griffin went on to play 9 seasons with the Chiefs from 1986 to 1993.
It was the ideal place for me to go because of the heritage, because of the tradition of Grambling guys ended up in Kansas City.
He was one of 10 players from Grambling to be drafted by the Chiefs. He learned from the legendary Eddie Robinson, who coached from 1941 to 1997.
He had a knack for not only coaching football players, he coached respectable young men. And he taught us to be patient and just seize that opportunity when it comes.
Of course, the most prominent Chief Robinson coached, Hall of Famer Buck Buchanan.
He was a great leader for us. He played it well, and he was one of those guys that was an inspiration for all the other guys.
He was big, he was physical, and he was fast. Somebody described him that he could run a 220-yard dash in like 20 seconds with a goat under each arm. Something wild like that, an exaggeration to be sure. That was just unheard of, that you could be that big, and that fast. And of course that physical.
The Chiefs were very happy to have him. Buchanan was the first African American to be selected number 1 in a professional football draft.
If I wasn't playing very well, I just had to do something to get myself motivated, and I would start squealing at not necessarily my players, but the opposing team, and telling the guy he's holding me, and if he don't stop, I'm going to kill him.
His selection paid off. 8 Pro Bowl seasons in his first 9, 70 sacks in his 13-year career. A defensive right tackle, he was one of the key cogs of Hank Stram's defense. In Stram's Hall of Fame induction speech for Buchanan, he said, quote, Buck was not an X and he was not an O. He was an O and an X. He was an ox.
My election to the Hall of Fame left me feeling extremely proud to be the first AFL defensive lineman to be enshrined in Canton.
In the case, we had 8 that Super Bowl year. 8 African Americans, I think 5 from historically black colleges on that team. And with those individuals, we were able to craft something that was unique.
Buck was a leading figure on those teams too. He was very much of a person that everybody looked up to. So he was more than just a great player. He was a community leader.
Another prominent Buck from KC could attest to it.
He had a way of getting along with everybody, but even you knew this, you couldn't push him.
In 1967 and 68, Buck had arguably his best 2 seasons, and off the field, he gave his time to KC in a time of racial unrest that was during the riots in April of 68.
Curtis McClinton and Buck Buchanan, in the midst of the Watts riots after the Martin Luther King assassination, had gone out into the community to try to keep peace and talk people from not burning down half the town or demonstrating.
He set the standard for Grambling Tigers playing in KC on and off the field. There is also defensive back Albert Lewis.
We used to refer to each other as homie. Hey, homie, let's get out there and get it done. I'm here if you need anything.
I thought about Albert Lewis, Fred Jones, Emmett Thomas, Buck Buchanan. I was like, wow, the Chiefs really, and when you look at it, they do a lot with HBCUs.
Lewis spent 11 seasons with the Chiefs, the last few years building the younger generation of talent behind him on the depth chart. Grambling left some more impact, drafting 3 other Tigers, Tracy Green and Fred Jones among those. They also picked up a guy who might have been the only guy bigger than Buck Buchanan and Ernie Ladd.
Ernie could eat, man. In the course of eating that meal, he looks up at Eddie Robinson and he says, I like the way you feed here.
But let's remember those Texas roots, shall we, when it came to HBCU players. How about Emmett Thomas? Last seen coaching Chiefs players as a defensive back coach, he had plenty of talent from tiny Bishop College in Dallas, a Hall of Famer, But unlike many of the HBCU players before him, he went undrafted.
The most important reason I'm here, I played the game with a lot of respect, honor that the game so very much deserved. From everyone who has ever had the privilege of strapping on a shoulder pad, that every time I stepped on the field at Municipal Stadium and later at Arrowhead Stadium, I did it with the knowledge that I was representing the Kansas City Chiefs.
He was a ball hawk, 5-time Pro Bowler, a league leader in interceptions, and most importantly, a key interception in the Chiefs' first Super Bowl win. 58 total interceptions. And then went on to coach defensive backs for 8 seasons with the Chiefs. In all, a total of 38 years coaching. Chiefs coach Andy Reid said of Thomas when he retired, quote, having a Pro Football Hall of Famer lead that room and share his experience as a player and a coach has been incredible for our guys. But as much as Bishop College was tiny, it was in Dallas, a tinier city, Prairie View, Texas. But in 1965, the Chiefs didn't take long to find Otis Taylor.
I grew up around the corner from Otis. Otis was a great quarterback in high school. We went to the same high school. I mean, he was, ahead of me, but we went to the same high school. He was a great quarterback in high school, great basketball player. I mean, he was just an all-around athlete. All of his former teammates who talked to me, to a man, Otis Taylor was the best athlete to come out of Prairie View.
To procure Taylor's services, the Chiefs had to beat the NFL. The Chiefs picked Taylor in the 4th round. NFL's Eagles picked him in the 15th. Scouts had Taylor secured in a hotel until Lloyd Wells came along.
Could talk players into doing a lot of things, which he did throughout his entire career at in the AFL. This is in the midst of the battle between the two leagues.
Wells came in through the back window, picked him up, signed him, took him straight to the airport, and his career at the Chiefs literally flew off.
He was a prototype for the modern day receivers. He had the size, and of course he had the speed, and those great hands.
Taylor had over 7,000 yards receiving, over 400 receptions, 60 total touchdowns. But he came through at the most dire time. Take the 1969 divisional game against the Jets. 61-yard reception followed by a catch from fellow HBCU player Gloucester Richardson for the winning touchdown. Led to the Super Bowl IV win, where he also had a touchdown. Alas, he's not one of the many Chiefs for that era in the Hall of Fame.
Otis was essentially the best. He was just the best. And it's just a shame that the Pro Football Hall of Fame has overlooked him for this long. I mean, that's credible. But for the longest time, he was the Chiefs' all-time receiver.
Only Tony Gonzalez and Travis Kelce have more receiving yards in Chiefs history.
He was just an incredible receiver. And, and in that era, the AFL was so pass-happy. In that era, I don't know how you can overlook it.
10 members of the Super Bowl IV win are in. Taylor would make a strong case for 11. And there are cases made for Taylor's inclusion in many places. Recently, Jason Watkins released a podcast where he's addressed Taylor not being in the Hall of Fame.
Most of the other teams in the league threw the ball around 100 times more per season than the Chiefs. Not that it's important, but if Lenny Dawson was throwing me the ball 20 or 30 more times a year, my numbers would be bigger.